Joe, how's it going, buddy? Good morning, YouTube. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. What does that mean? That means you guys tweet me articles and we talk about them. But today's a little bit different. You're not tweeting me articles because we got a guest. I hope you guys got your questions ready. I know I forgot to plug this week as good as I could have because our shows went so freaking fast this week. You guys were sending me so much stuff, and we got through so much of it. The hour just flew by, which is awesome. It's been really, really cool. You guys are kicking ass and taking names, and I appreciate it so much. And John is already here with us. We are joined by John Pelzer, who is running for the 30th district here in California. He's a congressional candidate, a progressive, and a Democrat as well. We're going to be talking about, some of those issues that are floating around. John, thank you so much for being here today, first of all.
Well, thank you.
All right. So usually the way we do things here, John, is we wait until we get 30 people on LiveMe before the show officially begins. Right now, we're sort of just preambling. Now, just so you know, LiveMe versus YouTube, folks, we are at 31 to 21. 31 on the YouTube, 21 on the LiveMe. It's been neck and neck a lot, but usually towards the end, LiveMe pulls ahead. Although right now we're 36 to 23, 39 to 24. It's going in real time. Guys, get your questions ready over on LiveMe, over on YouTube. Get your questions ready for John Pelzer, a progressive Democrat running for California's 30th district. I'm going to count on you guys for some. We've had some interesting guests. And we've had some great questions for them, some that they appreciated, some that they did not. But that's what Get Your News On with Ron is all about. You are basically you're giving a town hall to the internet of people that like this show and tune into this show and ask amazing questions. And we are pretty much there. We are at 28. Chromatic Tree, good morning. Good to see you, buddy. Hope all's well. 29. This is the final countdown. YouTube's pulling ahead. We got 48 over on the YouTube, 29 over on the LiveMe. Once we hit that 30, the show has officially begun over here on Get Your News On with Ron. Guys, start sending your questions now. And we hit 30. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. I'm Ron Placone, your host. We are joined by John Pelzer, candidate for California's 30th district. We already got a couple questions coming in for you, John. But first, why don't you give us a skinny on you? What are you all about? What are you bringing to the table? Why are you running for Congress?
Okay. The mission of my campaign is to end decades of special interest control over our voice in the House. Because I don't take any corporate or PAC money, I would be able to pursue a progressive agenda for the people of the San Fernando Valley. That's the big issue.
Okay, so let's go through the issues real quick. I looked on your website, but for anybody that is not as familiar with you, let's go through a couple bullet points. First of all, go healthcare, go education, go gun control, environmental issues, and then anything else you want to throw in there, and of course, money and politics.
Sure. Well, money in politics, obviously, that's the overriding issue, so that we can be liberated and people can have their voice. In terms of issues, healthcare, single payer, that's an easy one. Affordable housing is a very big issue here in the Valley, as it is everywhere else. And to legitimately address that issue means to address a whole bunch of other issues of equal access. But that's a very big issue here. On gun control, obviously no military-style weapons should be available anywhere. The age should be raised, and obviously very, very strict background checks. I mean, that's the common sense stuff that we've been dealing with for a long time.
So, guys, for anyone just tuning in that got here a few minutes late, we are talking to John Pelzer. He is a candidate for Congress in California's 30th district. He's a progressive. He's running on a progressive platform. He does not take corporate money. He's for single-payer health care. Now, are you for the Medicare for All bill?
I am. I am. I think that that's an incredible first step. And bring it back to the Valley, one of the things that has been distressing to me as a first-time candidate, let me just back up 1 second. Once I started researching, right after the 2016 election, I got involved in my local Indivisible group. I became the head of their research. And I became very aware that, you know, a couple of years down the road, you look at somebody's record and it'll say they voted for this, voted for that, they got 100%. But when you get into the weeds, you see when they co-sponsored something, when they voted for it. And 676, which I think is the one you're probably referring to, that is a perfect example where it took our incumbent 6 months to co-sponsor when a whole bunch of other Democrats had already done so. And he didn't co-sponsor until the Friday before a Sunday town hall. So, you know, that's the type of thing that we're talking about. It's not just a matter of voting for something, it's a matter of fighting for something. And that is all the difference in the world, when you support something and how strongly you do.
So we got some questions lining up here, but I want to start here. On your website, you talk about all these progressive policies, and you know, I'm pretty much aligned with you on all the issues you bring up. But then you bring up the Democratic Party and how you've been a lifelong Democrat, and you mentioned that you fought for every presidential candidate on the Democratic side. So I got to ask, does that include this past one? And if so, did you kind of see any conflicts there?
Well, I did. After Clinton got the nomination, I did work for her election. And the reason I did that was, unlike a lot of my progressive friends, I definitely saw a difference between her and what we have now, especially in the area of judicial appointments. You know, if she had been elected, she may not have been able to get her Supreme Court nominee through the Senate, but we would not have Neil Gorsuch. So that was an area where I differ with others. And I also felt that when all was said and done after the convention, the platform, you know, was largely Bernie's. So I may be a little bit more practical than others, but that was the way I went after the nomination.
Okay, and you didn't see, I mean, because all the issues you bring up, I mean, she's kind of, Hillary Clinton was on the other side of those. I mean, especially money in politics.
Sure. No, again,
that she's against
sure.
single payer. She's anti-frack, or she's pro-fracking, excuse me. She is against living wages. So, I mean, you said that her platform is close to Bernie's. I heard a lot of people say that, and I know there's a couple fluff press releases that were released that kind of point to that. But I kind of think that's not true. In what way is that true?
Well, the official platform, the Democratic platform, was heavily influenced by Bernie. And again, the main reason that I did what I did was more for the judicial, because that is the power they have to select Supreme Court judges. And I felt that that was a very major thing, because those judges impact us for decades. And I'd rather have a Democrat picking judges than Trump.
I understand that, and I don't disagree with you, but I mean, morally, did you feel that our arm was kind of twisted? I mean, this is one of those situations where, I mean, Obama, instead of fighting for a pick that was rightfully his, instead of doing that,
right,
he was a cheerleader for the TPP. That was all he did. And while people in DAPL were getting their heads cracked open, he said, we're going to let it play out. I mean, his last couple months in office were nothing short of disgusting. You don't have to agree with me. I know you have to be more diplomatic than I do. But his last few months in office were embarrassing and absolutely disgusting. And I really had to look in the mirror and say, I voted for this guy twice, and now I'm questioning that. And I questioned it plenty of times before. But I feel like this incrementalism, when you go the lesser, let's just settle for the lesser of two evils here. When you do that, that guarantees Trump's indefinitely. What I mean by that is you're going to get a centrist that offers nothing, or a right-wing demagogue, and you're pretty much guaranteeing a right-wing demagogue every 4 to 8 years. That's why eventually we have to put our foot down and say, enough is enough with the incrementalism, because it has failed, and it has failed miserably, and the only people winning in this scenario are the donors. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. And again, I'm separating out the judicial appointments from the other legislation, the other stands, because again, these are things that hang around our necks for decades. Is it a perfect scenario? Not even close. But that was the decision I made based on judicial appointments.
All right. All right. So who were you for in the primary? Were you a Bernie guy?
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to some questions. Let's see here. Somebody complimented my Rick and Morty shirt. Thank you very much. What would you do to end daylight savings? And for voting third party, I know you've asked this question a couple times, and I don't understand the conflict directly. I know there is one because other people have brought it up.
By the way, can I back up 1 second?
Just yeah, sure.
You asked, just to be totally truthful, and obviously my votes are private, don't have to say this. By the time I supported Bernie, by the time the primary came around, and it was obvious that Hillary was going to get the nomination, again, this is about the judicial, and I wanted her to beat Trump. I wanted her to come out of California with as big a head of steam as possible. So I did vote for her in the primary. There, I said it.
So you actually weren't truthful with me. You said you were for Bernie.
I was. That's why I went back to clarify.
But you did not vote for him.
I did not.
Okay, so you never voted for Bernie. You voted for Hillary. You were Hillary all the way.
Well, I wouldn't say all the way. I favored Bernie. I would have rather. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I appreciate your honesty. In the future, if someone says, were you for Bernie in the primary, the correct answer is no. Just so you know, I'm not trying to pick on you. It's just that's the honest.
That's why I clarified.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your honesty. All right. So what would you do for daylight savings time? Again, this is an issue I'm a little foggy on, but forever, you got to explain this to me sometime. But is daylight savings a concern for you?
To be honest, it has not been till this question.
So I know there's some kind of issue with farming, and again, forever voting third party, you got to explain that to me sometime, so that way I can give people a little bit of context as well. I think some of us, especially like maybe someone like myself who's only lived in California for a couple years, we're not as fluent as to why this issue is striking. So if you could enlighten me, because I know you've asked that question a couple times, and I know it's not a bad question. I'm just I need to be a little more informed on it, and I think some of our guests do as well. It's not something I think a lot of people are cognizant of right away. All right, let me go over to the super chat here. Convo Couch, thank you very much for the super chat contribution. Where do you stand on Russiagate?
I think we should just let Mueller do his investigation. Other than that, we've got many, many other bigger issues to tackle, and we really shouldn't spend any more time on it. Let him do his thing. End of story.
Okay, so you're kind of against all the media hysteria and the hyperbolization and the fact that they talk about it about 23 hours a day.
Well, absolutely. And it's not just, I find that, among the shiny objects floating around, that's certainly the biggest one. And that also goes for the corporate Democrats. I think they'd rather talk about that than their own records and their own involvement.
So when do we, and again, I'm not, when do we put our foot down and stop supporting this status quo? If when it comes, your website has a lot of great policy ideas. I'm in agreement with all of them. But when it came time to cast your ballot, you voted for Hillary twice. When do we put our foot down and say this status quo is broken? It's almost like, to say we can just stand with the Democratic establishment because Trump's awful, but then actually want real progressive change, which no, the Democrats do not stand for. I know that they kind of adopted Bernie's platform a little bit when it looked like it was going to help them win. But when you look at the better deal and all this stuff, they're not for Medicare for all. They're not for living wages. They have a lot of nice empty platitudes without any actual policy ideas. And a lot of these candidates that say they're for Medicare for all now, and I think in a lot of cases, they're giving us a head fake. I don't trust Cory Booker to vote the right way when the time comes. I don't trust Kamala Harris to vote the right way when the time comes. How are you different than them? Are you different than them?
Right. Well, I am. And I think that, and again, just to make that point one more time, it was the judicial aspect of it that determined how I voted. Now, when I first announced I was running, like 7 months ago, some of the pushback I got was, what are you trying to do? Make a district blue bluer? Now, that was not a conversation I wanted to have, because that's the conversation the corporate Democrats want us to have, because it minimizes what exactly we're trying to accomplish here. And if you need a color coding for your politics, it wasn't about blue, it was about green. It was about not going with the corporate controlling contributions and to go with the liberating grassroots contributions. So that is something that I'm very, very sincere about, very strong about. And I think that is what makes me different than certainly my opponent and a lot of the other Democrats in office. This is where, you know, you can't kick all these cans down the road all the time. And that is where I am drawing the line, because it's about the money. I realize that Citizens United, overturning it is an incredibly long haul, especially with the makeup of state legislatures. More adequate public financing is also down the road. So my take is, if more candidates like myself don't take any special interest money and are successful, that should embolden others to do the same. And I think that's the most immediate thing we can do.
All right. So I beg your garden. I love your screen name, first of all, and thank you for the super chat contribution. Very, very much appreciated. What will you do to stand up for net neutrality?
Well, I think it's sort of funny. One of the things that still getting used to is being in favor of states' rights, which is something I never thought I'd be saying. So I would certainly do everything we could to support the states and what they're doing now, which is to stand up to the federal government on that and to make it an economic issue where they will control what their citizens get. So I would do everything within my power from the federal standpoint to enable the states to do their thing, especially with the current administration taking the stand they have.
So you would favor state net neutrality laws? Like, I mean, we
Absolutely.
have a bill here in California.
Absolutely.
That, you know, and it's a well-intentioned bill. Unfortunately, it does lead, like, it is a little bit susceptible to lawsuits. So we're totally not out of the woods yet. But you would try to do everything in your power to make it boil down to the states so that we can have strict net neutrality protections.
Absolutely. And that's just one in a series of things that, you know, is now being thrown back to the states, whether it's the environment, what's going on with ICE and sanctuary states and cities. So there's a series of things like that. And that certainly fits in there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a suppression issue big time. I'm with you. So, okay. Sorry, I'm trying to organize the questions the best I can. Are you willing to speak out against censoring on the social media platforms as it's happening now, to not only conservatives, but to progressives as well? I think this is in reference to a couple progressive personalities are being censored more on YouTube. And on other platforms. We actually had a guy, Tim Black, on who's out of DC. He was banned from streaming. And this is kind of all a cyclical effect of Russiagate. You know, one of the things that has happened with Russiagate, because of the hysteria element with it, is that, you know, the FBI is on social media more than ever before,
Right.
and they're stifling independent media. Could you weigh in on that some?
No censorship. I mean, that's the whole point of it. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. You got the right. I mean, it's the old story. If you've got to defend the most outrageous to have a democracy at all. So no censorship. Left, right, middle. That's it.
Do you think there's any, like, just following up on that, and maybe you don't have a concrete answer right now, but do you think that there's some policy ideas that could kind of give greater protection to that?
I think that it's a matter, again, this kind of brings me back to the courts and their power, because these things always end up there. So that's why you need judges who are strong believers in the First Amendment. Again, that just brings me back to that.
Okay. So,
and again, that's another thing I would say also, in addition to bringing it back to the states, which was usually a Republican thing, also litigation. That's always been a tool of the right. It needs to be a tool of ours as well. Whether, just like they have been pecking away at Roe v. Wade, we need to be pecking away at Citizens United and all these other things. So that, again, judiciary.
Okay. So on that, Kimmy wants to know, who are some of the media, indie media folks that you like to watch?
You know, it's interesting. I go back to the sources as much as possible. I actually read the legislation and the comments. So I'd have to say flat out that I don't have any particular people. I make my own decisions based on research.
Well, where are some of the outlets you like to go to for news?
Well, I go to all of it. I go for Fox, I go to New York Times, I go to LA Times, just to see the parameters. But after that, there are certain progressives that I like and I follow. And then I make my own decision. But I do my own research. I try to go back to the sources as much as possible.
Okay. Who are some of the progressives you like?
Well, there's Congresswoman Jayapal up in the Northwest. I think she's fantastic. I think that there's, well, certainly Bernie would be one that I do always seek his opinion on things, see where he's at. There's a lot of members of the Progressive Caucus that I admire. But again, I just go back and do my own research.
All right, cool. So like as far as personalities though, I think that was what Kimmy's question was loaning to. Like, are there any, it's okay if the answer is no. You could really stroke my ego and say Ron Placone, but are there any progressive personalities you're a fan of?
Well, I won't stroke your ego. No, I mean, again, I just do my own thing. I do my research. I listen to everybody.
Fair enough. All right. Let's see here. John, what can you tell us about the fact that the Democratic Party leaders are actively recruiting candidates with a military or intelligent background, making up half of the Democratic nominees for Congress? Do you have any opinion on that?
Well, I mean, the fact that somebody has a military background isn't determinative in and of itself. It depends on where they stand. I understand that it's Democrats are always trying to be tough, always trying to look tough. And I get that. But one thing that I am cautioning everybody about is that when I started this race, my first time candidates, obviously I've been learning as I go. And one of the things that has been amazing to me is finding out, for instance, in high schools where military recruiters can walk in anywhere, go anywhere in a high school, whereas a college can only meet with a student in the guidance counselor's office. Then I would go to the street fairs. Again, as a candidate, set up a booth, even here in Sherman Oaks, where I've been living for 35 years. And you would see an exhibit from the Marines, and there would be a tank there. And you'd see parents taking pictures of their sons in the turrets. And this is right after one of the mass shootings. So there is I understand what they're trying to do by looking tough, by having military experienced candidates. But that in itself is not determinative of anything. But I do think there's a caution there because it does sort of propel the narrative of the importance of the military, which, obviously we need to make not so important.
Sure. And I think that's what, again, this is a viewer submitted question, but I think that's what they were going for because, I mean, I certainly, I'm with you. I can think of a few people just off the top of my head. I would love to see them in office and they have, Sam Ronan has a military background. Justin Santopietro out of Virginia has a military background. I'd love to see either one of them in office. But I think it's kind of this, I think, first of all, it's this whole, like, we need to just focus on this identity thing instead of platform. I think that's a little bit part of the issue. And then, like you're saying, this desire to look tough, this desire to casually go along with the economy of war, which, I don't know about you, but I certainly think really needs to end.
No, absolutely. And I would mention Steve Dunwoody is somebody who I do admire, who has a military background, running for assembly here in California, a true progressive.
And Gloomy Goblin recommends Nina Turner to you if you're not already.
Yes. Yes.
Or Nina. Wow. I said Tina. Wow.
Yeah.
I've done that before. I'm
a
big music guy. I've loved Nina Turner to death, but I'm a big music guy. So just, I'll have a momentary brain fart. I've said it before. I'll do it again.
Yeah. I will sit corrected on Nina Turner.
Yeah, no, she's, I'm a big fan of hers. Yeah. Okay, let's see here. We got a lot of questions. David Hildebrand points out the primary wasn't decided before California voted, despite the AP voter suppression tactic. CG points out, hey, Ron, what will John do to stop the commoditization of water by Nestle and Central California farmers?
Well, I've been actually involved. I'm a member of Food and Water Watch. I've done a lot of the protests with them. Obviously, that's part of the privatization that we need to stop across the board. And I would certainly work for legislation in Congress to do that, and also use the power of federal monies to make sure that they don't go and support any kind of privatization. Because clearly, you don't want to pay 10 times what the water costs because it's going through a private utility. It's ridiculous.
What's your stance on fracking?
Must stop yesterday.
Okay. We're going through these. What percentage of the military budget should be cut?
Well, I hadn't had a figure in mind, but I've got to think top of my head, at least 50%. And that's just for stars. Because clearly they now have a surplus of military hardware, which is why we're seeing it oozing onto the streets. They're looking for customers. So I don't think we need it. We've got a surplus, so I would just start with 50% easy.
All right. Let's see. We still got some more for you here. How do you feel about Bernie Sanders if he runs for president again?
Well, obviously I support him, but you will see what happens at the time. By the time he does.
By support, you mean you would vote for him?
Well, right now I certainly would, sure. But you got to know who else is going to, it's a ways off. I would certainly, as we talk now, absolutely support Bernie. Again, minus what we talked about, as I did before. But, it's a long ways off. And people come out of nowhere. This time, in other cycles, who knew about Bernie Sanders before that? Who knew about Barack Obama? People come up.
So are there any folks that you're hopeful for? Like, are there any 2020, and again, this is a couple years down the road, but are there any 2020 folks that you think, man, I could really get behind that? These people are really inspirational.
To be honest, no, because most of the ones that I know that are in office are taking corporate funds, and that's the litmus test for me. There are people running like, Stephen Jaffe, other people that I certainly connect with. I don't know, national aspirations. But right now, it's very difficult because that, to me, is the first question. Do you take corporate money? And I just don't see
Why wasn't that your litmus test in 2016?
Again, at that point, it was about judicial appointments. That's very, very important to me. I've got 2 daughters. How these people decide these things affects their lives and other issues, other people, for decades. And I don't mean to be so one-notish on it, but that was the determining factor for me, to have that power over the appointments.
Okay, so someone wants to know, Bobby wants to know, will you speak out against arming Israel and Saudi Arabia? What is your take on that?
Absolutely. And that is one of the issues that, in addition to just being hampered and controlled by corporate interests, my stand on Israel is very different than the incumbents. I just don't understand it. Endless war has not done anything. So while we continue along that line is a mystery, not a mystery, but disappointing to me. I felt that moving the capital to Jerusalem was just gratuitous gasoline on a fire, and very, very, very cynical. 2-state solution, these human rights issues. And again, even here, you see politicians take various stands based on the support they get. But when you have politicians supporting anti-BDS legislation, that is obscene. I mean, that's First Amendment. It's obscene and it's wrong.
Well, did you hear the recent Chuck Schumer video where he spoke at APAC? I mean, that was like borderline fascist, the stuff he was saying. I mean, he was reducing it all to like, oh, well, you know, the reason we don't have peace is because people don't believe in the Torah. And, you know, if you're against what the oppressive Israel government is doing, you're anti-Semitic, which, I mean, that's the same logic as saying if you're against the endless war that the United States is doing, you're anti-American, which obviously is not true. You know who's also against that? Most freaking Americans, myself being one of them.
Well, that's it. I mean, I'm Jewish. It's a process I went through myself. And when I realized what was being done to me in terms of being labeled an anti-Semite because I dared question what was going on, you get over that. But that was a process because you're brought up a certain way. But yeah, it's very distressing how we're not tackling human rights.
Well, let me ask you to expand on that a little bit, because yeah, I'd imagine that you know, you are often at odds with some folks in the Democratic establishment and so forth on that. Have you ever gotten some significant pushback, or on the other side of it, do you think that some folks are kind of evolving on that a little bit and recognizing, wow, this is a human rights issue, and you know, stuff that this government is doing is disgusting and brutal, and they're shooting people and they're killing people, and this isn't about anti-Semitism. This is about diplomacy and human rights, and we got to kind of change the way we look at this thing. I mean, do you see that happening? Or
it has happened. In fact, again, being a first-time candidate and being involved in social media, which I previously avoided, the first time I came out and criticized those issues, the joke in the family was people didn't know my name on Monday, wanted me dead on Tuesday. You know, it was a little shocking for a couple of minutes. Then you realize how you handle it and you move on. But the other thing is that I believe that 80%, and there are polls, I mean, you know, we're not alone. This is clearly the tail wagging the dog here in terms of Israeli policy. I feel that Jews like myself, I won't speak for you, but I feel like maybe I am, are much more even-handed on this than those who are making the decisions. You know, and somebody had said that, you know, AIPAC is in a lot of ways for the Democratic Party, the NRA. I mean, it's that type of power.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as power and influence goes, yeah, that's a fair analogy. I'd say that. Yeah, I've never heard that before, but yeah, I don't think that's inaccurate. I don't know. Do you?
I think it's accurate.
Yeah, I'm with you.
That's why I said it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I hope you're right. I mean, I really hope that some folks are starting to come around on this. I mean, when you hear Chuck Schumer, who is, you know, by many accounts kind of the leader of the party, say this stuff. Did you see that speech? Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? Or
yes, I did.
I mean, it was disturbing. I mean, it was like, that was not okay.
It's not okay, but it's so transparent. It's just so transparent. And that's why, you know, it's funny, you know, you go for endorsements with various groups. And I've been very fortunate, ADA, Field of Burn, very fortunate about that. But a lot of the forms ask you, what is the first thing, what is the most important thing you would do once you're in office? And I have to hold myself back from saying, if I get elected without taking any special interest money, that'll be more than most people accomplish in a lifetime in politics. So, you know, again, I have plans, I have ideas, but the first thing is just to get the money out for the people of the Valley to have somebody who is free to represent them. And that would include, you know, positions on the Middle East.
All right. So we got to get to some more questions here. So how will you work to transition away from fossil fuels?
Again, this is another can you can't keep kicking down the road. You can't give federal funds to support that type of thing. You have to bite the bullet. You have to start the infrastructure with the green economy, because it's a win-win. It's the future, it's jobs. It's just a matter of courage. You know, it's really, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but it's just a matter of stop putting off these decisions. You know, don't be talking about, you know, a bullet train or some other, fanciful thing. Be talking about light rails local. And again, even in my area, why we would ever consider bringing federal funds to widen the 405 is crazy. It's just crazy. And again, you just have to bite the bullet. It's not easy, but the money is there. This we know. We just got to make the decisions and move ahead and don't support fossil fuel. I was also just, I was arrested for the first time last October as one of the people protesting Aliso Canyon. Just an idea of how strongly I feel about this. At the end of the day, you've only got your body to put behind these things, and that's what I will continue to do.
All right. So let's see here. This is from Dennis from Germany. And this is something that I guess references a recent victory that Germany had. What are your positions on unions and or worker co-ops?
Well, unions are essential. When they do well, everybody does well. It's also been a tremendous platform historically for the people who do make up the Democratic coalition, which we've lost sight of when we're chasing other things. So I'm very, very strong. You got to get rid of the right to work. Very, very strong union. Absolutely.
Do you think that enough people are talking about right to work? Just like big picture, not even like, I mean, you can answer it within the state, but like just kind of big picture. Because I feel like that's an issue that, I mean, I don't think people realize how dangerous right to work really is. I mean, I used to live in Tennessee. I've seen it firsthand. And I don't think like the idea of that going federal, the effect that could have. Do you think that's something we're harping on enough? I mean, I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, we're not harping on it enough, and our own party is to blame for that. I think the last election, despite the conversation we just had about it, the Democrats blew it. They ignored their basic coalition, and those are unions. And because they did that, it didn't get the kind of coverage it should have gotten and still needs to get. I think it's going to change, especially with the policies now, which are going to make the life of workers worse, by the day. But no, it's not gotten enough. And we are, as a party, a big part of that blame.
And just for clarification's sake, when you're saying we, you're not including me.
I'm sorry.
I'm not in a party. I'm a lone shark. I'm a comedian.
My
I
party.
always be an outsider.
My party.
Your party. But, well, do you feel that the Democrats have completely lost their footing with unions? I mean, recently, unions have said, we're not just going to hand the Democrats our votes anymore. Like some union leaders came out and say that we're not just going to hand out these endorsements like candy anymore. We're going to go policy over party, which I'm 110% agreeing with, because I think there's progressives all over the place. Some of them are even trying to Republican enter, as a matter of fact.
No, in issues like this, party schmarty. These are things you just need to be on the right side of, period. So I don't make any, and I think it's really been my party's downfall by not staying with, you go home with who brought you to the party. And we have not been doing that, my party.
So how do you fix that? Can you fix it?
Sure. I mean, again, it's the candidates who you support and what they stand for without the money, because then, again, it comes back to the money. If you're free to do what you need to do to take the right cause, then supporting unions, ending right to work is part of that. When you take from the special interest, you cannot do that. So again, it starts at the local level with elections and electing people who don't take the money.
All right, so we got some more topics here. What is your take on the private prison industry?
Well, I don't know who said it, but it was almost funny. It's like, making privatizing, putting people in jail. What could go wrong? Of all the areas of privatization, which of course now go from utilities to parks to everything, the federal prison system and money bail as part of that is horrendous and it's obscene. So yes, that's a that's a no-brainer to me. And again, part of what I saw firsthand when I got arrested and I was in the Van Nuys jail, when I allowed myself to get arrested, because everyone had a choice they could make at the time, because we were told disperse or be arrested, I knew as a white male that it would not be a big issue. I would be able to look back on it as an experience for the right cause, but still, I wasn't really worried. Then I get into the holding cell, and there's a young man of color there, and the entire 3 hours I was with him, he was begging people on the phone to help bail him out. Now, nobody tells you what it is. You have a pink slip of paper that says the bail is $5,000. Everybody kind of knows it's 10%, so it's $500. But we also know that more than half of the families of color do not have $500 for bail. Or anything else for that, any emergency. So later, like much later, when we got transferred to where we were going to stay for the night, the same young man was still on the phone, begging friends, ex-girlfriend, whatever it was. So yeah, it's obscene, it's racist, and it's got to stop.
How would you begin if you were in office? And I know it's not an easy, it's a long process, but how would you start those wheels turning to stop that? Especially when, I mean, you're bringing up the Democrats again. I mean, there's a lot of colleagues of yours that unapologetically support the for-profit prison system,
well,
or they throw their staff under the bus. One of the two.
Well, again, it's who's supporting them. I know that here in California, we are working. There are bills in process to do it with money bail, and that's certainly something. And there are bills at the federal level, so that's certainly something. And the federal prisons just got to shut it down. I don't think. Again, it's a matter of the money. If you're free to do what is right, these are the things you do. If you're not free, you can't do the right things.
Amen to that. Okay, so how do you feel about how the California Democrats did not support, Troy wants to know this, how do you feel about how the California Democrats did not support health care in California? I'd imagine that's in reference to the 562 bill
562.
And Anthony Rendon. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, disappointing on so many levels. How many people have died in California since then? I wouldn't, it's almost like capital punishment, by what you make, by decisions you make, people die, and that's totally unacceptable. What I think is good, and we saw part of this even with the students in Florida and the attention on Rendon, who held it up here. People are getting much more comfortable concentrating on the particular elected officials and just saying to them, get your act together or you're gone. And that is what is happening in California. And it was also disappointing because one of the things I would love to be able to do in Congress is to be an ambassador for all the great things that California is doing or trying to do. And that certainly would have been one of them. That's, I feel that will get straightened out and we will get it here in California. But it's going to be a matter of the voters to hold people accountable. And I think that there's a lot less patience than there used to be for letting people vote their contributors and not their conscience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know that Stephen Jaffe is a colleague of yours that you're buddies with. He's done this show before. I love Stephen. And, kind of drawing this parallel, they screwed him over by saying, oh, you need a certain amount, and I'm oversimplifying what actually happened to him just for time's sake, but, hey, you need a certain amount of delegate signatures. He goes and he gets it, and then they're like, oh, wait, no, this isn't enough. Just kidding. Here's this other list you never even got to see, and tough marbles, buddy. Ha ha. So he's taking it to court. Similarly, the nurses are told, hey, just write this bill. We'll take it from here. You need X, Y, Z in the bill. They give the bill, hey, here's X, Y, Z. Oh, you need a Q and S and T. We didn't tell you that, but tough marbles, no single payer. Anthony Rendon, who gets a bunch of money from the big pharma lobby, he's going to shelf this. It kind of seems like the game is rigged. Do you agree or disagree?
I absolutely agree. And, people talk about what state the Democratic Party is in. I hope this comes out right. I'm all for a bloodletting. It's time.
I mean, I'm totally cool with what you just said. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I kind of thought I was preaching to the choir, but
Yeah, you're in a safe space here, buddy.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree, and bring it on. Bring it on.
Well, how are you gonna, I mean, like everything we just talked about, don't you think like there's a good chance there's going to be a hurdle thrown in your direction? And how do you plan to deal with it when and if it happens?
What do you mean a hurdle? When I'm in office or running for office?
Running for office. I mean, it seems like, look, the DCCC, and I gave two for instances. There's a lot more all across the country. The DCCC and the DNC, it seems like their first priority is making sure progressives don't get into office.
Right.
Their second priority is maybe beating a Republican, although that comes in second because the gravy train is still coming regardless.
Right.
So given the fact that I would make the argument, their first priority is keeping people like you out of office. Unless, of course, if you get in office and you don't, back up any of the policies you talk about, but assuming you will, their first priority is keeping people like you out of office. How do you plan to fight that?
Being a first-time candidate, one of my biggest strengths was my ignorance about the process. If I had to decide that I would have enough money, I'd have enough volunteers, I wouldn't be here today. It's a leap of faith. I did not look at the party structure, who might support me, who might not support me. This was a calling I felt I had and could do at this time in my life. So I'm just saying that this is not something that I am deterred by. I started it without the party apparatus. I will finish it without the party apparatus.
So we'll talk a little bit about the anatomy of the campaign then, to kind of get back to just structure and strategy here. What have been some of the endorsements you've received thus far?
Well, the two ones I've gotten so far are the local chapters of ADA and Feel the Burn. A lot of the other groups are still in the process of making endorsements. I'm hopeful to get more progressive endorsements because that is a key to me being successful, certainly in the primary. But the response has been very, very good. It's a hard way to go, but we're doing it. It's one foot in front of the other, and I see progress every day.
So talk a little bit about the anatomy of your actual race then. Who are your opponents? Where can people learn more info, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, we have, obviously Brad Sherman. He's the 21-year incumbent. His support for my running around the district now for 7 months is incredibly thin. Somebody who's been in office that long, they become like your uncle. Sometimes your uncle's wrong, sometimes he's foolish, but he's still your uncle. So I just need to keep pounding the pavement, showing what can be different, and showing people that, basically to accept the status quo will guarantee the people of the Valley and everywhere else, a future that is morally and financially bankrupt. And we need to it's about self-determination. And that message is resonating, that if you get somebody in office who isn't beholden to all the special interests, then we can have the future we want, not the one that's being handed to us. Now, also in the race, my particular challenge is the Republican, because every time, with one exception, when they redistricted and two Democrats went against each other, by and large, it's always a Republican who gets an easy 14% of the vote. And you've got 10 Democrats slicing and dicing each other, and that allows the Republican to stop the Democrat from getting another Democratic challenger. In my case, of being a progressive Democrat. So that is really the mission, to beat the Republican in the primary, so that I can go toe to toe against the incumbent.
All right, so we just got a few more questions here, and then of course I'll let you, give people all the more information they need to learn more about you. Kate, thank you very much for your contribution. First of all, and here is her question, Mr. Pelzer, what is the best way constituents can support you when you win and are in office? Ron, great show. Which platform supports your show best? YouTube or LiveMe? Kate, it's all about, I'll answer my part first. Kate, it's all about your personal preference, whichever one you like better. Just feel free to tune in on that platform. And of course, the Patreon is the best way to support this show directly. Mr. Pelzer, what is the best way constituents can support you when you win and are in office? Or I guess I'll add on to that for the sake of the campaign itself to help you win.
PelzerForCongress.com, FOR. The website will enable you to donate, which of course is needed, to volunteer. And that's clearly the best and fastest way to help the campaign.
All right, so one more. Kimmy wants to know, because we do a lot of book recommendations on this show, because I myself, I've been talking about how I go to the gym and I like to listen to a lot of books these days. I've been doing that. I never got into that before, but I started getting into it when I was on the road. I used to be on the road full time, so I listened to a lot of audiobooks, and now I'm doing it again at the gym. But have you ever read Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky or Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank?
The Chomsky, yes. The second one, no.
I recommend it. It's a great book. All right, so guys, we are out of time. Thank you guys so much for participating and for your great contributions and your great questions. John, please let everybody know where they can learn more about you once again, please.
Sure. Pelzer for Congress, PELZERFOR Congress.com. And again, what we're trying to do here in the Valley is nothing short of revolutionary. And as we all know, revolutions are not spectator sports. We need everybody to become engaged for this to happen.
All right. Thank you very much. So again, that is Pelzer for Congress, and for is spelled out, FOR, Congress.com, Pelzer for Congress. Go to learn more about John, more about his campaign. He's got a lot of good policy ideas. A lot of the policy ideas we're about here. John, thank you so much for doing this. It's not the easiest show to do in the world. You're accountable to all the viewers. They're going to ask you heavy questions. I'm going to ask you heavy questions. And clearly we don't agree on everything. So I do appreciate your honesty.
Not a problem. I appreciate it as well.
All right. Thank you very much, John. Best of luck to you.
Thanks.
All right. Guys, this has been Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. That means you guys tweet me the articles. You guys send the questions. And that's how we build this show. Thank you guys so much for helping to make this a special thing. I have a blast doing this. It means the world to me. It would not be awesome without you guys. It would really suck without you guys. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for your great questions for John. Thank you for your great questions for everyone we've had on so far. Follow me on Twitter at Ron Placone. That's where you send me the articles. Or, of course, use our Reddit subsection, reddit.com/r/GetYourNewsOnWithRon. RonPlacone.com. Me and Graham got some tour dates announced. Plus, we got some local shows in Los Angeles. March 15th, we're going to be at the Sycamore Tavern with a new political comedy night that I am running. Tweet at me to get on the guest list for that. Seriously, do it. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. You want to support this show? The best way to do it, become a patron. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. I just got t-shirts because goal number 1 was reached. And for all you guys that are already members, I will be sending more info on that, as well as information generally. Guys, thank you so much. Have an absolutely wonderful weekend. We do this every Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be back Tuesday at 10 a.m. Have a great weekend. Stay safe in this crazy world of ours. Peace.